Now, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov accuses the outgoing U.S. administration of not being honest in fighting terrorism in Syria. Lavrov said the Obama administration was deceitful when it came to differentiating terrorists, such as the al-Nusra Front, from the so-called moderate opposition. The top Russian diplomat expressed hope that the new U.S. administration under Donald Trump would cooperate more effectively on Syria. Lavrov, however, stressed that it is premature to talk about Trump's foreign policy and that Russia will speak about it after he takes office. The Russian foreign minister was briefing reporters on Moscow's foreign affairs in 2016. He also referred to the upcoming Astana talks on the Syria crisis and said discussions are expected to consolidate a ceasefire regime there. Joining us now via Skype from London is Marcus Papadopoulos. He's a publisher and editor with First Politics. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, sir. Now, boiling it down to basically U.S. administration's inability to differentiate between terrorists and the so-called moderates is basically what the strife has been between U.S. and Russia when it comes to Syria for all of 2016, if not more. What do you make of that approach, though?
Well, of course, the only moderate force on the ground in Syria is the Syrian Arab Army, and all the other groups which are fighting against the Syrian government, be it the so-called Free Syrian Army, al-Nusra, etc., are all Islamist terrorist groups. But at the same time, I'm quite aware that in order to strike peace accords, history shows that governments do need to deal with, do need to speak with odious groups. So in light of that, I fully support the upcoming peace talks in Astana, Kazakhstan, even though, as I said, the so-called opposition groups which will be represented there are Islamist groups and they are terrorist groups. But nonetheless, as I said, we do have to talk with repugnant people in order to bring about peace, sometimes. Having said that, however, it is no surprise that the Americans have been lying when they have said that they have separated moderate groups fighting against the Syrian government against the Syrian government itself, because of course the Americans have long been supporting al-Nusra, which of course is a formidable fighting force in Syria, second only to ISIS, and it is not within the interests of Washington to leave out al-Nusra, because al-Nusra of course remains a very, very potent threat to the Syrian army and ultimately to the Syrian government. So the Americans will not relinquish its ties to al-Nusra.
Let me just jump in there very quickly if you can. When you speak of U.S. support for groups like the al-Nusra Front, one has to then wonder what is the U.S. objective here, because if they continue to support terrorist organizations, what incentive is there for them to sit down on the negotiating table and map out a peace process?
Well, we have to see what the foreign policy of the Trump administration will be in regard to Syria. I sincerely hope that Donald Trump will end all forms of support to the terrorists in Syria. But what we know is that the Pentagon, the CIA and the State Department and the various war lobby groups on Capitol Hill have been supporting groups like al-Nusra in order to bring down the Syrian government, because if the Syrian government collapses, then ultimately Russia will lose its influence and power in the Middle East. Iran will see its influence and power in the Middle East greatly reduced. And of course, Hezbollah, an arch enemy of Israel, will sooner or later become a spent force. So it's a game of chess that the Americans have been playing in the Middle East, in Syria specifically. And I really do hope that the Donald Trump administration will change its policy on Syria for the better and will stop supporting the various terrorist groups, including al-Nusra, which of course has been Washington's trump card. No pun intended.
All right, let's wait and see how this pans out. That's Marcus Papadopoulos, publisher and editor of First Politics, joining us via Skype from London. Many thanks indeed for your comments here on Press TV, sir.